Hello friends, and welcome to our Japanese stab binding video for 7th grade. Before we start, I want you to know that this unit has two parts, just like every other unit. We've got the practice and proposal part. During practice and proposal, you'll be graded on developing criteria to guide the making of a piece of art with meaning, and you will also be demonstrating persistence. For our unit project, an artist statement, you will be graded on demonstrating the standards of craftsmanship and reflecting and explaining important information about your process and information in your artwork. Okay? We haven't gone over this yet, but we will. All right, you have 4 vocabulary words. Remember that you need the definitions as well as the words in the back of your notebook. For art, I will be looking for them. So your first word is bookbinding. Bookbinding is simply a phrase that refers to a method of making a book. Usually you're doing some sort of sewing. If you look at any of your books, especially your composition books, you will see that there is some sort of thread and they're holding sections of pages together. I'm looking for one in here, but I don't want to spend all of your time looking through my stuff. There are lots of different ways to bind a book. Some people just punch holes in the side and put a spiral through them. Other people fold pieces of paper and then sew those together. You're familiar with closed-bound books. They're super common. If you stare down into the spine, you'll notice that there's what's called folios in there. And those are each sewn together, and then a cover is created using board and binding paper, and then that book is then bound. There is also open spine binding. The sewing method is the same as the closed spine. The difference is it doesn't have a hard spine on the back. This is a pretty old one that I made. The third type that I'm going to show you, the type that we're going to make, is called Japanese stab binding. And that is basically just a stack of paper with a protective cover on it that is sewn. So this is the quick and dirty Japanese stab binding technique here. It is done purely for functional purposes so that the book can work. You guys are going to be doing something a little more decorative and artistic that will add meaning to your own personal sketchbook. Japanese stab binding. Pattern is a repetition of any of one or more elements of art. In this case, we're going to be using lines and shapes. You're going to be creating pattern with string, and I would like you to create a pattern that is meaningful to you. We will talk about how to do that in a second. And then the last is template. A template is simply a plan or something that can be used over and over again to get the same result. This is my example of a template here. So when I'm finished with my Japanese bound sketchbook and I run out of room and I want to make one that has the same pattern, I don't have to do all the measuring again. I can just use this. Cool. All right. So let's talk about the steps. Again, you need not only the things that I have written here, but also the answers to anything that's blank. So you're going to want to write down step 1, get an idea. This is the idea generating process, and then you need to fill this part out. So start with a drawing. It could be your name or an established pattern, right? I started with my initials. Lately, I've been noticing that when I initial things quickly, sometimes my A looks like a star, and if I run with that idea, I've got the G. I'm also a Sagittarius, which is represented by the archer, and this part of the G kind of looks like an arrow. so I can have a little star archer arrow there, and that is where I started with my idea. Not quite finished with it. The idea that I have would be a level 2 idea. It's simply stars. It's something that we've seen before, and I would want to figure out how to get this archer in there in a way that is visually pleasing and acceptable to me to move on to the 3. Step 1. To get that idea, you can begin by drawing it out. You can also just start sewing, right? So over here, I kind of started with my name. There's an A, this is an L, and then I was like, oh yeah, signature, let's try to do a star. Let's try to do it again, and then I started drawing a whole bunch of stuff over here, right? Step 2, practice your idea. So you'll see that a little bit here, and you'll also see that I got another little bookmark, right? And started practicing even further. So number 1, remember that for the practice part, you're getting a feel for how this process works. And number 2, you need to be patient with yourself. It's okay to do something like I did and be like, all right, I need a new thing. I think I need to choose a new type of string. Don't be afraid to do that, okay? That's my second idea. Step 3, fine tune your idea, which is again what I started doing on here. To do that, you're going to use a ruler to measure the distance between holes that you have poked. Now again, things aren't perfect here because I was still practicing, but what I'm noticing is on the stars that I like, there's a distance of 2 centimeters between here, 3 centimeters roughly between there, and there's 1 centimeter between the feet of my stars, right? So by fine-tuning the idea, I'm gonna have, and I wrote notes on here, right? This is 1.5 centimeters high. You guys can use inches if that works better for you. I chose to use centimeters because I noticed that things were lining up better with them. Once you've got that down, you can start transferring those measurements over to a template or a final bookmark. Okay? Step 3. Oh, yep. Create a dot template. There we go. Cool. And then step 4 would be creating your sketchbook. We'll get to that in a second. When you guys are practicing, you are going to be flipping this bookmark over and over again. Notice that all of my measurements are on the front, there's nothing on the back. So it's a good idea to take a push pin and just poke a hole, poke, 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 where your dots are on your template. This protects the durability of your bookmark and eventually your book, because you're not going to be trying to shove a whole needle with a string through there. You've got pre-poked holes. Yay! All right. So there's my template, and we would sew and create a final bookmark on this. So after you've fine-tuned your ideas and you've practiced and you have a whole bookmark that looks exactly the way you want it to, you are going to begin creating a sketchbook. Things to remember. Number 1, oh boy, use a hammer and a nail to pre-create your holes. So just like in the bookmark that I just poked, your sketchbook is going to be much thicker, so we need something more than a push pin. You need a nail and a hammer. You guys are going to use binder clips to keep your paper together. I'm at home and I don't keep binder clips at home, and I already ran to school for supplies once, so I'm using rubber bands. There's more than one way to do everything. Binder clips tend to work better because they don't want to curl the paper, right? But for my purposes right now, I've done this enough that I can deal with rubber bands. You guys are going to choose a cover. We have that. We have some cardstock. which will be nice and strong, and then you're gonna get to binding. So I'm gonna walk you through this process real quick. Set your next page up, notes on process. There are 5 things that we want to remember with the process, and I want to know why you need to remember those things as well. Write that down, because I'm gonna start switching our little setup here up, and you won't see that. Woohoo! All right. So, here we go. So I've got my cover, front and back. I've got my stack of paper, and I have stapled them for you, so it'll be a little easier to keep them together. I've got something holding it all together. I have a piece of wood under my sketchbook, so I'm not nailing into my floor or the tables that people try to draw on. We don't want holes in those, right? I have pre-measured my holes, and I started hammering, nailing them out. And when I did that, I was noticing there might be an issue with some of the spacing down here. If you are being patient, you will remeasure that. If you are not being patient, it's going to affect your craftsmanship. Patience and craftsmanship kind of go hand in hand. Once you've got them measured, you're going to use your nail. You're going to line it up with your holes, and then you are going to tap, tap, tap very carefully so you don't smash your finger. If you smash it hard enough, your fingernail will fall off, and you might cuss. And then I'll be like, not the right time and place, guys, right? So there's one. I'll just do like 3 or 4 of these so we can move on to the binding part. And then I'll finish this so you can see it in class. All right, it might be a good idea to flip that book over. Do you see how my holes went the whole way through? It's also a good idea to kind of nail those back the other way. And that way you can get them the whole way through. There we go. So that is 1. Poke your holes. The reason you're doing that is it's going to make your life easier. You're not going to be able to shove a needle through stacks of paper. It's going to save the needle. It's going to save you a lot of frustration. All right, number 2, you are going to get some thread. I will have different colors. Very important, before you start sewing with this, you need to grab a block of beeswax and wax the thread. This is 2, wax your thread. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm laying the thread over the wax. I'm holding it down with my thumb or bringing it over a quarter, and I'm waxing the thread. The reason we do this is it becomes a lot easier to manage. You can't see it quite right now, but my thread becomes way more limp. I'm not even sure limp is the right word. Stiff. It's less likely to tangle itself into knots. This will make your patience last longer, right? We're looking out for ourselves. Make sure that when you're measuring, you don't go any further than 1 inch. We can call this number 3. It should probably be number 1. No further than 1 inch, because that is where you are not going to be able to access your paper when you open the book. And we need room to draw. So if you see this one, this looks like about 1/4 inch. And as we open it, we lose that space, right? Number 4, your string, when you're sewing, it represents one continuous line, kind of like a contour drawing. If you guys have ever done that with me before, where you don't pick your pencil up, this takes time to get used to, which is why we do the bookmarks. Because you'll find out that if you start like if I started in this hole back here, I would end in that hole, and then I wouldn't be able to get over here very easily. Depending on your design, you're gonna notice different things like that that you need to pay attention to when you are sewing, right? And then number 5 is be patient. This is a very rewarding process. I think that's that hole right there. And if you are patient, you're going to have a really nice book, and you'll also have a skill that you can use. I'm going to wrap this around the back. I might have already messed that up. I don't know. So you'll see I'm not just making my star, right? I have to, yep, that's right. Kind of making half on one end and half on the other. So I'm constantly flipping this over so I can see where I need to go next. So I have my design on both sides. All right, you do want to pay attention to what is going on both sides of your book. This is an object. It means it has a front and a back. There are 2 places where the design matters and where people look. So this might be where I kind of did something silly. But I think it's gonna be okay. If it wasn't okay, I would have to retrace my threading out towards the end. Hooray! There's the first part of my design. So you see how this is, those rubber bands really want to make everything curl. That's why you guys are going to use binder clips. And it does look like I did something really silly with the measurement on here. But again, for our purposes, I think we are going to be okay. There we go. That's Japanese stab binding. I will finish this and you will see it in class next time I see you.